Have you ever wondered if you could turn into a monster? Not in a fantasy or horror movie, but in real life. What if, under the right circumstances, you were capable of things you once thought unthinkable? History suggests that even the kindest people can become ruthless under pressure. But how? What makes someone cross that invisible line between good and evil? Psychologist Philip Zimbardo spent years studying this disturbing transformation. His research led to a shocking discovery: goodness is fragile. It can be twisted, manipulated, and even erased when people find themselves in the wrong environment. He called this phenomenon the Lucifer effect, named after the angel who fell from grace. This theory explains why ordinary people, like you and me, sometimes commit extraordinary acts of cruelty. If you've ever thought, "I would never do something evil," think again. Experiments and real-world events prove that, under certain conditions, anyone can change. Power, authority, and group influence can reshape our moral compass in ways we don't even realize. But there's good news. Understanding this effect can help you avoid falling into its trap. Stay with me until the end of this video, and you'll learn how to protect yourself from the hidden forces that push good people to do bad things. Let's begin. We like to believe that the world is divided into good people and bad people, heroes and villains, the kind-hearted and the ruthless. But what if the truth is far more unsettling? What if the difference between a hero and a monster isn't who they are, but where they are? Think about history. How did ordinary citizens become brutal soldiers during wartime? How did respected officers commit horrifying war crimes? How did one's loving neighbors turn against each other in times of crisis? It's easy to label them as evil, but the reality is much more complex. In many cases, these people weren't born cruel, they became cruel. The question is why. One of the most famous psychological experiments in history set out to answer this. In 1971, a group of college students walked into a research lab at Stanford University. They were ordinary people just like you. None of them had criminal records. None of them had violent tendencies. Yet, within days, some of them transformed into something terrifying. What happened next shocked the world and revealed a dark truth about human nature. Let's dive into the experiment that proved just how easy it is for good people to turn into monsters. In the summer of 1971, psychologist Dr. Philip Zimbardo and his team at Stanford University set up a groundbreaking experiment. They wanted to study how people behave when placed in positions of power and submission, so they transformed the basement of the psychology department into a mock prison and recruited 24 ordinary college students to participate. The students were randomly assigned to one of two roles: guards or prisoners. The prisoners were arrested at their homes, blindfolded, and brought to the fake prison. They were given identical smocks and assigned numbers instead of names. The guards, on the other hand, were given uniforms, mirrored sunglasses to hide their eyes, and full control over the prison environment. There were no strict rules, just one instruction: maintain order. At first, everything seemed normal, but within just one day, things took a dark turn. The guards, who were just average students a day earlier, started acting aggressively, they began mocking the prisoners, depriving them of food and sleep, and forcing them into humiliating punishments. The prisoners, in turn, became anxious, submissive, and emotionally broken. What shocked researchers the most was how quickly the participants forgot they were in an experiment. The guards became cruel, not because they were forced to, but because the power went to their heads. The prisoners, on the other hand, felt trapped so much so that some of them begged to leave. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It was shut down in just 6 days. The abuse had escalated so fast that even Dr. Zimbardo, the man running the experiment, didn't realize how far things had gone until an outsider called it out. This proved something terrifying. Good people, placed in the wrong situation, can become unrecognizable. But why? What made these normal students act like this? To understand, we need to break down the 3 psychological forces that drive the Lucifer effect. The Stanford prison experiment wasn't just about role-playing. It revealed something far more disturbing. When people are placed in certain conditions, their behavior can change dramatically. Even those with no history of cruelty can become heartless. But why does this happen? Dr. Zimbardo identified 3 key psychological forces that push people toward darkness. These forces are at work in prisons, corporations, and even everyday social situations. Let's break them down. Have you ever noticed how people act differently when they feel anonymous? Crowds can turn peaceful protests into riots. Online trolls say things they would never dare to say in person. When people lose their sense of individual identity, they become capable of things they normally avoid. In the experiment, the guards wore uniforms and mirrored sunglasses. This made them feel less like individuals and more like part of a system. The prisoners were stripped of their names and given numbers, which made them feel less human. This loss of personal identity created an environment where cruelty felt impersonal. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a shocking study. Participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person whenever they answered a question incorrectly. What they didn't know was that the shocks weren't real. The person being shocked was just acting. Yet, despite hearing screams of pain, 65% of participants continue to press the button when ordered by the experimenter. Why? Because when an authority figure gives a command, people are more likely to obey, even if it goes against their morals. The same thing happened in the Stanford prison experiment. The guards weren't bad people, but they felt they were simply following the role they were given. The prisoners, too, obeyed even when they could have walked away. They were trapped not by force, but by psychological submission. Ever been in a situation where everyone around you was doing something, so it just felt right to go along? That's group influence, and it's incredibly powerful. In the experiment, once the first few guards started acting cruel, the rest followed without question. The environment shaped their actions. The same happens in real life, whether it's bullying in schools, unethical practices in workplaces, or mob violence. When we see everyone else doing it, it starts to feel normal. These 3 psychological traps: losing your identity, obeying authority, and following the crowd are the foundation of the Lucifer effect. They explain why history is filled with moments where good people turned into monsters. But this isn't just about the past. These forces are still shaping our world today. Next, let's look at real-life examples where the Lucifer effect played out in shocking ways. The Stanford prison experiment was just a simulation, but its effects are seen in the real world all the time, from history to modern society. The same psychological forces have led ordinary people to commit extraordinary acts of cruelty. Let's explore some of the most shocking examples. One of the darkest moments in history was the Holocaust. Millions of innocent people were imprisoned and murdered. But here's the disturbing question. How did so many soldiers, officers, and even civilians participate in such evil? The answer lies in the same three psychological traps: de-individuation. Soldiers wore uniforms and followed strict orders, which distanced them from their actions. Obedience to authority. Many later claim they were just following orders. Group influence. When everyone around you is doing something, it becomes easier to justify. Most of these people weren't born cruel. They became cruel because of the system they were in. In 2003, photos leaked from Abu Ghraib, a U.S. military prison in Iraq. The images showed soldiers torturing and humiliating prisoners smiling as they posed next to victims of abuse. The world was shocked. These were trained professionals, not criminals. So why did they do it? Dr. Zimbardo himself analyzed the case and found chilling similarities to the Stanford prison experiment. The guards were given total control over prisoners. They wore uniforms and had power, making them feel dominant. They were in a high-stress environment, leading them to justify their actions. This wasn't a one-time event. It was a direct example of the Lucifer effect at work. You don't have to be in a war zone to see how situations change people. Just look at the internet. Social media has created a world where people hide behind usernames and screens, saying things they would never dare to say in real life. Cyberbullying. Ordinary people turn into ruthless trolls because they feel anonymous. Cancel culture. Mob mentality takes over, and people rush to destroy reputations without knowing the full story. Fake news and misinformation. Lies spread quickly because people follow the crowd without thinking critically. This is the modern Lucifer effect. People losing their morals because of the environment they're in. These examples prove a terrifying truth. Anyone can change under the right conditions, but does that mean we're powerless? Not at all. In the next section, we'll explore how to resist the Lucifer effect and protect yourself from becoming a monster. If good people can become monsters, does that mean we're all doomed to fall into the same traps? Not at all. The Lucifer effect shows us how people change, but it also gives us the tools to resist that change. Awareness is power, and by understanding these psychological forces, you can protect yourself from being manipulated by them. Here's how. The first step in avoiding the Lucifer effect is knowing that it exists. Most people believe they're immune to influence, but history proves otherwise. Ask yourself, is my environment shaping my behavior? If you find yourself doing things that don't align with your morals, pause and reflect before it becomes a habit. Authority figures can be wrong. History has shown this time and time again. Whether it's a boss, a teacher, or even a government, never follow orders blindly. If something feels unethical, trust your instincts. Dare to ask, is this the right thing to do? It's easy to justify bad actions when everyone else is doing it, but just because something is normal doesn't mean it's right. Some of the greatest heroes in history were those who stood up when no one else did. If you ever find yourself in a group where things feel wrong, have the courage to walk away. The moment you stop seeing people as individuals, you make it easier to harm them. This is why prisoners are given numbers instead of names, and why online trolls target faceless strangers. If you want to resist the Lucifer effect, make it a habit to see people as human, no matter the situation. The best way to avoid the influence of a toxic system, stay out of it. Surround yourself with people who encourage integrity, empathy, and independent thinking. A good environment strengthens your morality, while a bad one weakens it. Choose wisely. The Lucifer effect is real, but it doesn't have to define you. The battle between good and evil isn't just out there, it's inside all of us. The question is, which side will you choose? So, can anyone turn evil under the right conditions? The answer is yes, but only if they let themselves. The difference between good and evil is often just a choice made over and over again. The more aware you are, the stronger your resistance. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think anyone can become a monster? Have you ever seen the Lucifer effect in action? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into human psychology. Thanks for watching, and remember, you control the person you become.